I am a Celtics fan, so keep that bias in mind as you watch this video, but I do wholeheartedly believe that last night is a completely different game if Tatum plays. For one thing, not only would we have had Tatum on the floor, but then we would not have seen the worst starting lineup in Game 7 history. There's no reason for Ron Harper Jr., Luka Garza, and Baylor Shireman to be sharing the floor together in a Game 7 must-win situation. The fact that we didn't start Kata and Pritchard is absolutely insane. Kata went on to have his best game of the series coming off the bench. If he had been in the starting lineup, it would have been even better. I don't know what Joe was thinking. He was trying to get a different look, I guess, but it just made no sense. We let ourselves get into that early hole, and from that point forward, Philly was just in a rhythm. They shot it outstanding from three. We again could not stop Embiid because, again, we insisted on defending him with a center, or we saw Jaylen Brown get some minutes on him. I really hated that. I would have liked to see Ugo or Jordan Walsh get some more run on him. Walsh should have played more. Ugo should have played more. We went on that big run in the second when Ugo was playing, and then for some reason, he just doesn't see the floor again. It's just some baffling coaching decisions. I think with Tatum on the floor, this goes Boston's way, but it shouldn't have gone to 7 anyways. They shouldn't have needed Tatum on the floor yesterday. Just awful series all around from Boston. Joe Mazzulla is a phenomenal coach when he feels like actually coaching, but his game plan in the postseason these past 2 years has simply been to shoot 53s a game. Doesn't matter what their percentage on them is, who their opponent is, and whether there's a better way of scoring points on them, or even who's on the floor for his team, because he is absolutely wasting the talents of players like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown by having them play in an environment where the entire strategy is just to take as many three-pointers as conceivably possible. It would be a different matter entirely if Tatum and JB were simply being surrounded by shooters to get them better looks at the rim, but that would mean less threes being taken, so that doesn't fit with Mazzulla's philosophy, and so we aren't going to see that as long as Joe Mazzulla is coach. We'll see if he is coach beyond this season. I don't want him to get fired after this season. We still did not have a complete team for long this season. Again, Tatum was out for the majority of the year. If he hadn't been out with that Achilles, there's no doubt in my mind that he would have been playing all series long and probably at a more effective level. He did great coming back from injury, but I think he could be even better. And so next season, he is going to be fully back to healthy. And then we'll see what the Celtics can do after some off-season shakeups. It is going to be interesting to see the direction this squad goes in the off-season. They got tons of valuable contributions from their young guys and unproven guys in the regular season. In the playoffs, Joe just completely turned away from that, which again is, I think, a big reason for the loss. He relied on his starters too much, relied on the three ball too much. They could have gotten guys like Ugo Gonzalez, Jordan Walsh, Baylor Shireman, Ron Harper Jr. in there, getting some offensive rebounds, getting some easier looks, so that even if those threes aren't falling, you are at least getting something in the paint. Instead, though, again, it was just 53 pointers a game, and when those shots aren't falling, it's just impossible to win games. Celtics were great all season long at having a mix of lethal shooters and players who can attack the rim, live in the mid-range, and crash the offensive boards to create easy putback opportunities. But for some reason, as soon as the postseason rolled around, it became solely about shooting, and their more efficient offense is just pushed to the wayside. The Celtics are flat out a better team than the Sixers in just about every way imaginable, but for absolutely no logical reason, Joe Mazzulla has his team exploiting none of their actual advantages over Philly or utilizing mismatches. The only way his team is going to win is if they shoot their way to it, and Boston could not shoot it this series, just like last year when again they got beaten by a far inferior team because the offense suddenly becomes the most one-dimensional in the entire league as soon as it becomes the postseason. The Celtics shot 24-42 in this game from 2, which is 54% and a very efficient mark for postseason basketball, and then proceeded to shoot 13-41 from three-point range, which is 27%. Meaning they willingly took the majority of their shots from a distance where they were half as accurate as they potentially could have been. I'm obviously not proposing that the Celtics eliminate the three ball from their offensive attack, but if they had eliminated their 15 lowest quality three-point shots, not only would their percentages have gone up from 3, but they would have actually won the game, as even shooting at 33% on the 2-pointers they instead would have taken would have been enough to come away with the win. In spite of how awful the Celtics shot it, this was still a very winnable game the whole way through, but they just had, again, a complete collapse in the fourth quarter. We saw them with an awful first quarter performance. They were digging themselves out of a hole right from the jump, and then right when it got to the point where it seemed like they could maybe pull away at the end, that's when the shots again stopped falling. I believe they missed 10 in a row to close the game there, aside from that layup from Pritchard. That is absolutely unforgivable. This was a very winnable game, and the series as a whole should have been a win for Boston. If they simply put out their normal starting lineup, there is very little chance to get outscored by 13 in the first quarter and have to play the whole game from behind. And if this had been on even footing from the jump, even without Tatum playing, but simply the Celtics starting the game with their best possible lineup, I think the entire story of this game would be different, with Philly not being in control all game and Boston having to play catch-up, which is inevitably going to necessitate shooting even more threes with the way Joe Mazzulla coaches. I don't want to see Joe Mazzulla fired. He is one of the best coaches in the league in spite of another massively underwhelming postseason run. I just don't understand why his philosophy shifts so aggressively come playoff time, because during the regular season, the Celtics were the second best offense in the league and boasted a supremely balanced attack. But that all go thrown out the window in spite of common sense and the lessons he should have learned from last year in favor of the so-called most efficient shot in basketball, which, as we all know, is only true to the extent that you can make them. And in games 5, 6, and 7, they absolutely could not make them. Had they given up on the three-point shot once they stopped falling, they could have won each and every single one of those games. But instead, they just tried to power through, and it absolutely did not work in their advantage. Obviously, they lost every game. Not only did they lose, though, all of them were pretty bad losses. Game 7 was the only one of those that was a single-digit loss, I believe, and they still lost by 9, because, again, if the three-pointers are not falling for Boston, they genuinely have no offense to fall back on in the postseason, just because Mazula just wants them to keep jacking them up. The most infuriating thing about this is that the Celtics had a legitimate path to the finals. They weren't expected to even make the playoffs coming into this season. People were expecting to see a gap year and maybe even a tanking Celtics team. So for them to come out and not only play to win, but actually end up winning and do it with plenty of guys who had never had a chance to be part of an NBA rotation, and to forge a brand new identity over the course of just a single season was such a special thing to watch. And then it all comes crashing down prematurely because of the stubbornness of the same coach who led them to such an outstanding, memorable, gutsy, and genuinely motivational regular season, refusing to learn perhaps the single most important lesson he should have taken away from last year's defeat: that a team is only as good as the shots it makes. Blowing a 3-1 lead and losing in Game 7 is genuinely just one of the most heartbreaking things that can happen in the sport. And for a Celtics team that felt like its season should have gone on much longer than it did, it's, again, just a heartbreaking way to end your season. This season felt different than any I've ever seen before as a Celtics fan. I'm not sure what the team will look like next year, but this was something special that I'm never going to forget. And I'm going to be counting down the days until they're back on the court. But I know that the feeling just won't be the same as it was this season, and that is what's so tough and emotional about a loss like this.